And next, I'm delighted to introduce Right Honorable Lord of Richmond, William Hague. Lord Hague serves for 26 years in the British House of Commons until 2015. In that time, he served many senior positions, including Leader of House of Commons, the Leader of the Conservative Party, and Foreign Secretary. He now works a wide range of business and charitable activities. Thank you very much. And Lord Hague, please come up on the stage, and the floor is yours.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, good afternoon. It is a great pleasure to join you here at the Tokyo conference today and to follow that excellent speech by Mary Robinson, with which I strongly agree. And she concluded her remarks with a quotation from a Prime Minister of Japan. And I begin mine inevitably from a British person with a quotation from a British Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, who said something important about democracy, as he did about everything. He said, democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the other forms of government. And that is something we have to remember in our current situation, that democracy can throw up bad leaders, uncertainty, inefficiency, sharp changes of policy, strong disagreements. In the United Kingdom, we have been quite a good example of these things. In recent years, we decided to have a referendum on the European Union. This was not one of our best ideas in British democracy. That led to an upheaval in British policy, 5 prime ministers in the last 7 years. We now have an extremely good prime minister, but we have gone round in circles to get there. Many changes, many mistakes. However, we also see in our country the strengths of democracies. The political parties threw out leaders who did not have the right standards or the right policies. That they now have very responsible leaders. That the Supreme Court asserted itself against the government. That citizens feel secure in a country with freedom of speech and of the press and of personal life and opinion and openness to new ideas, and that these things for the long term are not in doubt. And so the lessons from democracy are very constant, that strong institutions are important in democratic society, and effective cooperation abroad is very important to the collective strength of democracies. And now we have to reinterpret those truths for a very difficult situation in world affairs, where the normal world that we thought we were living in for a long time has come to an end. From around 1990 to about 2015, you could believe you were living in a normal world that would not change, a world of steady globalization, the advance of liberal democracy, of peace between major powers, that everybody from Baghdad to Beijing would become more like us. History was at an end. There was a certain arrogance to it in the West, in democracies, a certain complacency to it. And now we can see that that normal world has come to an end, and it is not coming back. The effect of social media on politics will be permanent. The effect of climate change that Mary Robinson was just describing is changing world affairs. We have had a pandemic and are at increased risk of future pandemics compared to the past. We do have war between major nations. So the normal world is officially over. And now we're in a more disruptive and difficult and dangerous period. And in that period, we do indeed have to remember the responsibilities of democracies and to renew democracy, as is the subject of our discussions today. And I just have 6 brief suggestions to make. 3 of them concern foreign policy, and 3 of them concern the future of technology in democracy. The first 3 are, well, the first one is very obvious. It's already been discussed, which is to support Ukraine. Democracy is not the only issue in supporting Ukraine. It is important to defeat armed aggression, to uphold international law. But democracy is also at stake. Ukrainians freely chose their president. They freely chose their own path of greater friendship with European nations. And if that freedom is destroyed, then many other nations will not be safe in their freedom. So it is very important to give the military and political support that is necessary to enable Ukrainians to prevail on the battlefield. And when somehow that war is over in the future, it will be important to give sufficiently strong guarantees of future security to Ukraine so that this is not just one installment in a long series of wars. And it will also be important to begin to work on the reconstruction of Ukraine, which will be a vast task requiring international cooperation and generosity, and to begin that work soon so there is clear hope for the future for Ukrainians. So number 1 of my 6 suggestions is support Ukraine. The second one is, I can mention very briefly because Mary Robinson has already covered it. It is to engage the global South from the G7, from the Western democracies and Japan, in a much more imaginative and meaningful way. Opinion is different in India, Brazil, South Africa, even though they are democratic countries. It is very different about world affairs from in Britain or the United States or Japan. We do have to understand the cultural and historical differences. We do have to appreciate the belief that the West has been hypocritical or still behaves like empires or doesn't appreciate the need for a multipolar world. And we will have to do much more to align our own interests with those of the global South in many ways, but in particular on the climate finance issue, again already mentioned, on which progress has been made, but reforms to the World Bank would be very welcome. And serious consideration of the Bridgetown agenda put forward by Barbados for transforming finance for poorer countries facing adaptation to climate change should also be very strongly, very high on our list of priorities. So number 1 is support Ukraine. Number 2 is engage the global South. Number 3 is to build strong networks between leading democracies that are about trade and are about security in the absence of the global governance that we ought to see in a rational world. Democracies have to strengthen the networks between them. That is taking place in many ways, such as in the Quad, including Japan, such as in the G7, such as in defense cooperation between Japan, Italy, and the United Kingdom, such as in the AUKUS alliance of Australia, the UK, and the United States. But it will be important to build it up further and for democracies to strengthen their economic links and partnerships, such as is happening between the United Kingdom and Japan at the moment. Recent agreements on a science partnership fund and on technology and data. I would like to see agreements on supercomputing capabilities as well. So the third priority is to build strong networks of cooperation between democracies. My other 3 suggestions are less concerned with foreign policy, but with events happening everywhere in the world due to changes in technology. because my fourth suggestion is we have to do more to protect the truth. Democracy relies on some common understanding of facts and truth. And the rise of social media has increasingly called that into question. In the last few days, millions of people have watched apparent footage of Donald Trump's arrest. But Donald Trump has not been arrested. You can watch it on Twitter, and it's quite convincing. We have to make sure, in the age of social media, that the truth still prevails. I had a discussion recently with a man in Wales, in the United Kingdom, about why he voted to leave the European Union. And he said, I voted to leave the European Union because I found out they were going to abolish the Queen. And I said, how did you find out? Because it's not true, you know. There are kings and queens in the Netherlands and Spain and Belgium. The European Union doesn't abolish the queens. He said, oh, it's a pity I didn't meet you before the referendum, because I voted that way for that reason. He said, I found out on Facebook they were going to abolish the Queen. And so he believed what he had read because he never heard anything to contradict that. It will be important for democracies to regulate social media in some coordinated way that places duties of civil deliberation on social media organization and requirements to show alternative views and to make algorithms transparent so that we can see how people are being influenced. And my fifth suggestion is that we must use the natural advantages of democracies to lead innovation in the world, since we are probably entering the fastest age of technological change in the history of human civilization. And it will be vital for democracies to set the standards and to lead the advances in the world on these issues. The only way we will be able to pay for an aging population in our societies and for increased defense expenditure, both of which are very familiar to people in Japan, is to raise productivity and be at the forefront of technology. And there are many policies we can pursue in order to do that. And my sixth and final suggestion is related to that, which is that the governance of artificial intelligence will become one of the fundamental issues of the coming decade. In fact, I would argue, along with the book of Henry Kissinger and Eric Schmidt, The Age of AI, that was published about 2 years ago, that alongside climate change, the future of artificial intelligence will be the key issue of the 21st century. This is about to change everything and will bring a massive change, not just to jobs and businesses, but to democracy and to geopolitics. And it is vital that we generate now ideas about the best process of governance of artificial intelligence, which brings vast opportunities to humanity, but great dangers as well. For hundreds of years, the main advances in technology and communication have benefited democracy and decentralization. That was true of printing in the 15th century. It was true of television in the 20th century. It has been true of the internet on the whole in the last 30 years. Artificial intelligence is the first major advance which could lend itself to authoritarianism because it is based on the central processing of vast quantities of data. And so we have to make sure that artificial intelligence is in line with the standards of democracy and that its governance is characterized by transparency, decentralization, accountability, and that no one person, company, or authority, or country is in sole charge of artificial intelligence in the future. So these are varied suggestions. Support Ukraine, engage the global south, strengthen the networks of democracies, protect the truth, use our advantages to lead innovation, and ensure the governance of artificial intelligence is in line with democracy and not dictatorship. I leave you with those suggestions this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed.
Lord Hague, thank you very much for your comprehensive input of the state of democracy and your 5 suggestions.